Earlier today, I'm doing a group coaching call with my coaching students, clients, whatever you want to call them. And we started watching some strength and conditioning videos from the 90s and the early 2000s of very high level NCAA, Division One football, Division One basketball, NFL. And you know, a lot of people don't realize this, but the methods that I teach on my channel, these high intensity training methods, were very widely used all throughout the 80s, 70s, 90s, and into the early 2000s. And we're watching these videos, and you notice there's no Olympic power racks or Olympic platforms. There's none of this functional training weird stuff. It's Nautilus, hammer strength, maybe some Atlantis and some Cybex equipment. And they're doing high intensity training workouts. They're taking the athletes through very, very intense sets to failure. Usually just about one set per exercise, but pushing the athletes as hard as the athletes can push. And I'll link some videos in the description of these NCAA Division One programs and the NFL programs that were doing this. Penn State, Cincinnati, I know Michigan has done it forever. Florida State, tons of teams were doing this. And what I'm teaching somehow became controversial. And I'm going to explain to you why that is. Because what I'm teaching is not new. What I'm teaching is not controversial. What I'm teaching is just different by today's standard because of this weird shift in direction fitness and strength and conditioning took since social media came out. So before about 2010, before Instagram, really, before YouTube started being a place where people went for fitness advice, the approaches I teach were very common, very widely used, but not so much today because of where people get their fitness information. Mostly social media. It seems about when Instagram came out, things started to take a weird direction. And the reason is social media incentivized clicks and views and attention. So if you look at these older workouts from Penn State, Cincinnati, or the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Indianapolis Colts, the New York Giants, all these NFL teams who did high intensity training, once you've seen one workout, you've pretty much seen them all. There's not a whole lot of attention and views and drama you're going to get out of these training videos. So it didn't really work well with what social media rewarded. What did reward social media was very silly, stupid, dangerous, relatively ineffective exercises. And we see this on Instagram. Of course, we see it on YouTube. We've got people like, Joel Seedman or whatever his name is. And it's a shame because, the purpose of strength and conditioning is to improve the physical capacity of an athlete and reduce their chance or likelihood of injury by making their muscles stronger, thereby making their bones stronger, their connective tissue, their joints, tendons, ligaments, etc. So that way they could play longer and have a more successful career. But what a lot of these strength and conditioning coaches are doing now is there's absolutely no evidence behind what they're doing to show that it will improve their athlete's performance. They're more or less assuming that throwing medicine balls or jumping on one foot or doing box jumps or whatever other, like the Vertimax jump training system, they're assuming that these methods will improve their athlete's performance. But they've never measured it. They've never provided any sort of evidence or proof that these silly functional training or plyometric training things improve their athletic performance. Even strength training alone, even if done the way I teach it, you can't really prove that it improves an athlete's ability to perform, because it really doesn't. Most of strength and conditioning doesn't improve the athlete's ability to perform. It's just assumed that a stronger athlete is going to be a more successful athlete in many sports, in many situations, especially American football. So the problem with modern strength and conditioning, as opposed to the old school stuff, neither of them, there's really any evidence that it actually makes an athlete better. It's assumed. Okay, obviously. A stronger athlete is going to be a faster athlete. An athlete with more muscle is going to be more durable, obviously. But when it comes to the functional training stuff, the danger it places on the athlete's joints, the burden of proof is on the strength and conditioning coaches that teach these methods. Because if you are going to put an athlete's joints in such danger and accumulate a lot of micro trauma and damage to the athlete's joint, there better be a substantial trade-off in terms of improvement in the athlete's performance. But whenever you ask these modern strength and conditioning coaches that question, they immediately get defensive because they know they can't answer it. How do you take box jumps or power cleans or clean and jerk or clean and snatch and measure how that improved the athlete's ability to perform their sport? You can't. And so when you ask them to provide any sort of reasoning for doing these dangerous exercises, they simply assume that it increases an athlete's power, whatever that means. Power is subjective to the actual activity. There's no such thing as overall power. There's overall strength, which will improve your power in conjunction with improving the efficiency of a particular skill. But I find that a lot of these strength and conditioning coaches get very defensive when you question their silly nonsense. And I think the reason is deep down they know it's nonsense. But what they're trying to do is set themselves apart from the rest of the pack. If you come along and you do something drastically different, you can pass yourself off as some sort of expert. If you happen to train athletes that happen to become successful after they go through your training program, well, now you can portray yourself as credible. So what a lot of the strength coaches don't understand is that you're working with people, especially at the high level, that will perform well in spite of doing a plethora of things poorly. But many modern strength and conditioning coaches think the athletes are performing well because of their methods, when in fact, the athletes are performing well in spite of the awful exercises, illogical, unphysiological things that they're doing with their athletes. And this is a big problem because there are methods out there that are much more effective. If you look at this video, I'll put some up on the screen here. Much more effective more motor unit recruitment, more stimulus for improvements in muscular strength, and of course muscle size, which would definitely benefit, athletes in a lot of sports, not all sports, but, especially American football. So there's evidence behind this type of training. The evidence is it clearly makes you stronger. When you get stronger, you will add muscle tissue. But with the modern strength and conditioning coaches, they're talking about things like ability to start and stop, or change direction, or agility, or speed, power, and explosiveness. None of these things are general factors of functional ability. So they're under the impression that if I can become more explosive, or more powerful, or more agile in a particular exercise or movement, then that's going to transfer to the field. But there's no evidence of that because you can't measure it. Meanwhile, with these, the 1990s, 2000s approach to strength and conditioning, the evidence-based approach before all this Instagram nonsense, well, you could prove that the athlete is getting stronger. You can prove that they're adding muscle. You can measure it. But you can't measure general speed, power, or explosiveness because come attached with those things are a particular skill. So there's just this massive influx of completely incompetent strength and conditioning coaches who are training athletes based off of beliefs and folklore rather than evidence, reasoning, and logic. But my point of, making the video is to show you that it wasn't always this way. There were intelligent, logical, reasonable strength and conditioning coaches before. But since social media started incentivizing views, clicks, and crazy nonsense and drama and some kind of wow factor, they kind of got left by the wayside. They fell behind. So when you look at my training recommendations and you question them and you say, well, if they work so well, why doesn't everybody do it? Now you have your answer. Everybody used to do it until social media started becoming the medium where people find their exercise approaches and their exercise methods. And believe it or not, a lot of these silly things have permeated into strength and conditioning curriculum as well. So what I'm teaching, it's not bizarre. It's not my method. It's not even an unusual method. It is just less popular at this day and age because of social media. And that's most of it. There have been athletes over the last several decades getting bigger, stronger, and faster, safely and effectively, using a high-intensity training approach. And I guess, part of my mission is to kind of bring it back, because I think a lot of strength and conditioning coaches are performing malpractice based on their silly beliefs. So go ahead, watch these workouts. You can see what true intensity really is. You can see what a real, gritty, intense, aggressive strength and conditioning program should look like. You can also see what an effective, safe, and efficient strength and conditioning program should look like. And if you are an athlete, it would behoove you to do something like this, rather than something like Joel Seedman or Athlean X or all these other charlatan clowns who are simply trying to create content for attention and views and do not have your best interests at heart. Okay? So that's my thoughts on the strength and conditioning community or strength and conditioning arena of fitness. It took a weird shift into complete nonsense, but it wasn't always like that. Check out those videos. See what real strength training looks like. If you want some help learning how to apply real strength training, effective strength training to your own workout routine, go to goldenerasystem.com, try my program. It will outline the logic, the physiology, the reasoning, and the how-to when it comes to performing exercises and workouts like this, so you can see way better gains without beating up your joints in the process like most people are. Go ahead, like, subscribe, hit the bell. I got more videos coming talking about all this crazy nonsense of the fitness industry and explaining why most of it is wrong.